Hello, and welcome to the Rational National Live. I don't do these very often, but when I do, they're fun. So it is Tuesday, Aug. 14th, 2018, and on today's random show of stories, socialism is getting more popular. Brian Stelter doesn't know how to ask questions. Bernier, Maxime Bernier, is anti-Canadian. And if you don't know who Maxime Bernier is, I'll let you know. And Doug Ford has a new plan for cannabis legalization in Ontario. Is it good? Does it suck? I'll discuss that. And also, I'll be taking your questions in the super chat and also through Patreon. So if you're a patron and you send a question in, I'll also take those as well. All right, so the stuff that I have set up today is sort of all over the place, but I'm going to try to have some sort of flow to this. So first up, let's talk about this new poll that came out. So Gallup has consistent polling on how people feel about socialism versus capitalism. And some new results just came out that are, I would say, good, positive, trending in the right direction. Let's check out the first portion here. So this is views about capitalism and socialism by party. So looking at the 2018 rows, we can see that Democrats and Democratic leaners have a lower view of capitalism at 47% than they have in the past, a much lower view. Whereas socialism is at 57%, down just 1 point from 2016, which honestly I still find kind of weird. And Republicans, of course, not much of a change here. 71% still love capitalism, while 16% do not have a positive view of socialism. Broken down by age. Now, again, if you've been following the news on this, it isn't all that surprising. So we are seeing younger people have a positive view of socialism, whereas their view of capitalism continues to drop as people's lives are being affected by student loan debt or low wages, and people are understanding now that socialism, when applied correctly, is not a scary thing. And overall, though, I mean, you have to be honest with the results here. 37% of people still have a positive view of socialism, which is lower overall compared to capitalism, which is at 56%, but still capitalism is decreasing and socialism is clearly on the rise, though I would say not as not as fast as I would like it to be, but I think it's still a positive trend. Now, what does this say for the country? So I think this is going to really be a worldwide shift, and we're sort of seeing this in other countries as well. So in the UK, we're seeing Jeremy Corbyn, who is clearly a socialist, and his popularity continues to increase. And we're seeing, of course, Bernie Sanders in the U.S., where his popularity is increasing along with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Our Revolution-backed or Justice Democrat-backed or DSA-backed candidates. So there is clearly a trend in the direction where socialism is becoming more accepted by the masses. And I think it's really just a matter of time that there are going to be more candidates that are going to be elected to Congress in the U.S. that are more positive on socialism. And like anything, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually. So Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie Sanders, Rashida Tlaib, who just won her primary in Michigan and is going to be in Congress in November since she's running unopposed. These are candidates or politicians that push socialist ideas out there. And when people become more introduced to them and understand that, hey, healthcare, universal healthcare, all these other countries have it, why don't we have it? Socialism as a whole is going to begin to become more accepted. So I know this isn't really news to a lot of you that follow the news, but I think it's good to see these sort of data points to really have a reference to go to. Okay, before I get to, so just to understand, so you understand what I have going on here, I have a laptop in front of me where I have notes and other things, questions from patrons. I have my Mac in front of me, which is doing the streaming, And then I have the YouTube tab open to make sure everything's working properly and to take super chats from. So, and I'm doing the switching and the graphics and just the social media. Everything's happening at once. So if there are any hiccups, just so you understand, it's completely my fault because I'm controlling everything. Okay, let me take a question. So there's some patron questions. Let me take the first one. This is from Dr. Krager. Oh yeah, and if you have questions, send them in the super chat. I can't scroll through all the regular chat, obviously, to get all your questions out. So, but if you post a super chat question, I'll take those. So this is from Dr. Krager. Hi, David. Could you possibly talk about the current insane establishment witch hunt underway in the UK that is seeking to smear Jeremy Corbyn as anti-Semitic? I'd love you to do a story on this and perhaps even a quick interview with one of your UK connections to get the lowdown. Keep up the great work. Cheers. So I have seen tweets about this, stories about this. I haven't I haven't dived as deep into it as I want to, but it's a story that I will cover a little more. I know I covered it. I covered an aspect of this a few months ago. I'm forgetting how I covered it. I think there was an anti-Semitic smear of Jeremy Corbyn on, I think it was CBS or ABC, one of the Sunday news shows, and they smeared him there. They lumped him in with far right crazies like Alex Jones. So there is clearly this sort of false equivalency. I mean, here's the reality. There are anti-Semitics in every party. There are anti-Semitics that have every political persuasion. No matter where you lean on issues, there are going to be anti-Semitics that have the same views as you on certain issues. So to single out the Labour Party on this just seems absolutely ridiculous. I have not seen any evidence to show that the Labour Party is specifically or is any more anti-Semitic than any other party in the UK. But I'll look more into that and maybe do a story on it. Okay, let me get to, what am I getting to now? So let's talk about Brian Stelter. Oh, fun, Brian Stelter. Okay. So CNN had on Bill de Blasio to talk about how right-wing media has shaped the conversation in the U.S. Now, this interview was done by Brian Stelter on his CNN show, Reliable Sources. And it's the perfect example of how corporate media, that is not Fox News, corporate media like CNN and MSNBC, how they always frame the discussion from the right-wing perspective. So let me show you the first clip here. I have 3 to show you, but this is just the intro, and let's get down to it.
If you ask New York City's mayor what lies behind a lot of the negativity and the divisiveness gripping this nation, he's got a simple answer for you. He says it's the media empire of Rupert Murdoch that's at fault. Bill de Blasio has long been a critic of the hometown New York Post newspaper. Murdoch has owned it for years. He says it's right-wing propaganda. Now he's also been talking about Fox News as well, of course, on a week when Laura Ingram's hateful comments are in the news. This critique of right-wing corporate media coming from the left may have appeal in the 2020 Democratic primary, but isn't it rather Trumpian?
Absolutely ridiculous. How can you possibly compare what Fox News does, what Laura Ingraham did last week, where she talked about the scary changing demographics in the U.S.? How can you possibly compare that to CNN covering the Mueller investigation? They're not the same thing. So this is what the corporate media always does. Because the right wing outrages about every little fucking thing, what it ends up doing is it shifts the conversation to the right. So now people are focusing on oh yeah, fake news, because Donald Trump's calling out CNN fake news. That is the same thing as Laura or that's an equivalent to the left complaining about Laura Ingraham pushing racial division on Fox News. Those are not the same thing. They are clearly different. So why does the media keep accepting the right-wing framing on this narrative? Now, to me, this goes completely in the face of people that say that corporate media is paid to do this, that they're paid, that they knowingly are framing discussions from the right or from a corporate perspective. I don't think they do. I don't think Brian Stelter has ill intention here. I think he is honestly just in a bubble, and he is not aware of it. So that's how he frames the discussion. He thinks he's being neutral by comparing Donald Trump complaining about CNN fake news to Bill de Blasio complaining about racial division on Fox News. He thinks he's being objective in that. What he is actually being is in the middle of a right-wing perspective. So it's just completely false. Now let me play the next clip where Bill de Blasio makes his case, and I think he makes a really good one.
What is your critique of Murdoch? You were quoted recently by The Guardian saying, imagine the country if Murdoch had never had papers or networks here.
Right. We would be a more unified country. There would be less overt hate. There would be less appeal to racial division. I guarantee it, because what Murdoch did through Fox News and the New York Post, among others, is to create a dynamic where that stuff could come out in the open. We saw it in New York City for years and years, where race was infused into the dialogue in a very negative way, and it was a sort of an apocalyptic vision was created of the notion of going back to a time of crime and decay, and always putting that through a lens of people of color as the villains. Whether you're talking about Central Park 5 or so many other instances, certainly you saw that around the election of David Dinkins in New York, the way he was vilified by the Post throughout his mayoralty. But you see it on a national level as too. They don't just dog whistle, they go a lot farther than that. They put race front and center, and they try and stir the most negative impulses in this country. There is no Donald Trump without News Corp. I firmly believe that. He never gets to the presidency because he was never been elevated the way he was consistently for years and years. So I believe in a free, strong media with diverse views. I'll defend it with all I got. But we have to be able to call out when a particular company has a corporate agenda, has a political agenda, and has very effectively changed the American discourse. And by the way, when I was growing up with, I think, some real heroes of journalism, Walter Cronkite's an obvious one, and Murrow and so many others before him, they set a tone of evenness, respect. The civil rights movement of the 60s got a fair hearing because the American media gave them that opportunity to be heard. Today, you have one outlet and one outlet only that is constantly sowing division, and we should be able to talk about that.
So this, to me, is the most basic take of all time. Now, that's not to say anything bad about Bill de Blasio. What he's saying is incorrect. What he's saying is correct. But it's nothing new. It's nothing crazy. This is sort of standard. Everyone should understand this. Everyone should know that absolutely there would be no Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, without News Corp. 100%. So what Reagan did in the 80s by getting rid of the fairness doctrine, what it allowed is a company like Fox News or like News Corp to come up and produce Fox News and create this completely one-sided perspective, not even an attempt to be objective to the facts, just completely one-sided view. And we have seen the result of that. So in Canada, as an example, we still have our fairness doctrine, our version of the fairness doctrine. And we don't have the same sort of negative discussion that the U.S. does, at least in terms of. So look, there's always going to be things you can pick apart. So yes, we have a Doug Ford as premier in Ontario, and honestly, I think a lot of that is because of the fact that the internet has allowed a lot of these insane right-wing views to be more to push more to the surface. But for 30 years, we had a very civil discourse about politics in Canada. And we don't have a Donald Trump. We don't have serious racial divisions the same way the U.S. does. Now, that's not to say that we don't have our issues with how we treat Indigenous people or how people of color are treated here, but it's not to the same degree as it is in the U.S. It just isn't. And I think I'm a firm believer that it's because we have more control over what news is allowed to be in Canada than the U.S. does. So this is just the most basic take possible. What Bill de Blasio is saying is absolutely correct. Yet Brian Stelter, as I'm going to show you here, continues pushing back on it. So this is a combination of a few different clips where Brian Stelter comes back at Bill de Blasio for literally no reason.
I'm saying because they exist, we've been changed for the worst. Now, if you said,
But isn't that like saying they're fake news or they're an enemy of the people?
no.
There's lots of media critics out there, but politicians make lousy media critics. Why do you feel it's your role to be calling out a newspaper because you don't like the content?
When it comes to News Corp, they have a political mission, and we have to be able to talk about it. So my
But
view
singling
is,
out News Corp, it's like Trump singling out CNN.
Oh,
Two
it's-
wrongs don't make a right.
No,
Two
couldn't-
versions of something bad aren't.
couldn't disagree.
Because I think Bernie Sanders hit on a vein when he attacked the corporate media in 2016. It makes me wonder if you view this as a wedge issue or a campaign issue.
I've been talking about the corporate media since the 1980s.
That's true. You
Okay,
have been.
so,
You have been.
I sometimes say the New York Times takes an elite view of the world too often. I don't think that's a news flash, but I respect what they do and I respond to what they do. But if we have a force in our society that has fundamentally changed us, just again, think of that equation: a world without News Corp, a world with the kind of reporting, both sides, and a real devotion to objectivity that was the norm up through the 1970s in this country, what would we look like today? I guarantee you Donald Trump would not be president, and I guarantee you that what we're seeing today in Washington, the right and the alt-right and the negativity and the division coming out in the fore and feeling it has license, that wouldn't be true. And that's good when those forces don't feel they have license.
I still think politicians make lousy media critics.
We
though.
may, but if you're someone who has a belief system, as I do, you can't stay silent if you see something not being recognized.
All right. Brian Stelter, these points that he makes, they aren't even arguments. So this one that he says multiple times, politicians make lousy media critics. What does that mean? What does that mean? You're not forming any sort of argument against anything Bill de Blasio is saying. You're just saying, well, you're a politician, so I'm not going to even listen to you because you're a politician. How is that a stance? This almost feels like Brian Stelter feels like his job is in jeopardy because he's the media critic. And sorry, Brian, I think people that are employed by corporate outlets like CNN make lousy media critics. So Bill de Blasio is clearly making a better argument as a media critic than you are about right-wing media. Again, look, so people are going to be angry that I'm not talking about corporate news, corporate media. Well, that's also a problem. The way CNN frames things is very elite-based, looking at how policy benefits the elites. That's how MSNBC and CNN do their news. But when it comes to Fox News, they're clearly in a category of their own. They push racial divisions. They lie constantly, or they massage the truth to form their right-wing perspective and essentially to brainwash an entire mass of people. That is clearly in its own category, separate from corporate media. That's not to say corporate media is good, or CNN is good, or MSNBC is good. It's good to critique those networks as well. But understand that there is a difference between what Fox News does and what CNN and MSNBC do. And I forgot to mention in the last, before the last clip, that we also have hate speech laws in Canada, and I think that is also added to our dialogue around issues here, around political issues here, compared to the U.S. Now, some other things I want to hit on here. So yeah, what I'm really curious about, because I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if Brian Stelter here is playing stupid, or I'm sorry, I don't know if Brian Stelter is stupid or if he's playing devil's advocate. So if he's playing devil's advocate, I guess you could at least make an argument for, well, he's just coming at you from the right-wing perspective and allowing Bill de Blasio to knock down your ridiculous arguments. Fine. But that isn't what it sounded like Brian Stelter was doing. I mean, he voiced his own opinion there. I still think politicians make lousy media critics. So I think he's just stupid. And I don't mean stupid. I mean in a bubble stupid. He's not able to see outside his own perspective. I don't think Brian Stelter is a terrible guy. I just think he's completely unaware of where his view is coming from. Okay, let me put my name key up. There we go. All right, let me see if there's any. I think I saw some super chats. The way this is YouTube, the way you structure this. Okay, let me find the super chats and then I'll we'll ask some of them. In the meantime, how are you all doing? Good? I hope you're doing fantastic. Here we go, some super chats. Okay. If it'll open. Oh, okay. I was reading this weird. So this is from Baltaser. I thought there was more to the comment because he put ... So I was trying to click on it to see more of it, but there's no more. He just says, Ontario can't afford Doug. That, yes, nice pun there. And I agree. From Pop Reality. Should there be a tax on automation? I haven't thought enough about that. That's, I guess, a good discussion. I have no idea. From Mooskow, is Canada getting a for-profit healthcare system? No. Did you hear that from Alex Jones? No, we are not. We're good. So, so this is our healthcare system is this is how great it is. Now, again, there's always going to be issues, especially depending on the province, because each province implements it differently and has different funding for it. But this is how great it is compared to other countries, or at least compared to America. Here, even our Conservative Party is not pushing for a private insurance-based healthcare system. If they tried to do that, they would get absolutely destroyed. Because people for the most part, our healthcare system. So just like anything, you're always going to be able to find issues and find ways to improve things. But, on the scale of where Canada is compared to America, we're up here and we would like to be maybe up here. America's down here. So there's just no debate. And so, yeah, we're not getting a for-profit healthcare system. From Baltaser again. Check out Streamlabs OBS, customizable layouts. I'm not going to do your ad here. Do you run this company? I think I've seen this before. Maybe I will look into them, but I feel like I don't need it right now. But thank you. If you're just looking out for me, thank you. I appreciate it. NJ Curly 66. What's your take on the Russia investigation? So my take is I want the investigation to conclude before I have a real opinion on it. So this is what I find so weird about this whole conversation. You have someone like Rachel Maddow who is trying to almost get ahead of the investigation, trying to do the investigation herself on the side of Mueller doing the investigation. Which, look, if you're really into spy novels, maybe it's cool to look into that stuff. I don't really care until there are results. And there have been there have been indictments. I mean, Paul Manafort is going through what's it called? You know what I'm talking about. He's going through a thing right now. So, and I understand that Paul Manafort is, not being charged with working with the Russians to help Trump. I totally get that. But that's why I'm saying we should all sit back. He's going through a trial. Look at that. Words just escape. He's going through a trial. And sure, it is not about what people think Trump has done in terms of working with the Russians to get elected. But that's why, why am I commenting on it? Why would I do a story on things that, in my opinion, I'm going to sit back and wait? Now, that's not to say that other people shouldn't be reporting on it. But the way I report on stories is I want to actually have some sort of effect or understand what is going on, which is why I try to focus more on discussions around policy or candidates and or cultural issues, things that I feel like I can actually have a say in. But the Russia investigation, because I can't have a say on it, I'm not really into just doing straight up news. So people should cover that, and maybe there is a connection between in terms of collusion with Trump and the Russians, but ultimately I don't care until the answers come in. So for me to speculate sure is fun, but ultimately I don't really give a shit until we know what actually happens. But that is a good question, because I don't cover it very often, and I want you to understand why. I just don't do straight up news. I want to talk about issues that I can actually have some sort of effect on people in terms of their views on things. In terms of the Russia investigation, because I can't have my own view myself on it because it isn't concluded, it's weird for me to try and infect other people with my view that is inconclusive. So, if you get what I'm saying. Ruben Garcia. Does News Corp have propaganda outlets in Canada? That's a really good question. I don't know do they run Sun News? No, I don't think they do. Let me just look that up quickly because you know what? I feel like I should know this. I don't know. I'd have to do some more digging. But that is a good question. And it's quite possible they do. I don't know why they wouldn't, but it's possible they don't because we have stricter laws around press. But I don't know. Bernie or Guillotine 2020. Just wanted to lend my support. The one thing history has taught us, you can only step on the throats of the proletariat for so long before they grab their pitchforks. No war for nations, peace for classes. Thank you for your comment. All right. One more here before I get to the next story. Actually, let me save that. Let me go to the next story here, which is Bernier. Okay, this is sort of this one has a lot of screenshots to it, a lot of tweets, but it's important to actually form the story here. So, Maxime Bernier. Now, if you don't know who Maxime Bernier is, he ran for conservative leadership in Canada and ultimately lost to Andrew Scheer by, a very small percentage point. Now, he was viewed as the more libertarian sort of candidate. And I thought for a long time he would have actually been the more rational choice for the Conservatives to choose as their leader. But he went on some crazy anti-Canadian rant. And I'm going to show you why it's anti-Canadian. But first, let me show you what these tweets were. So let's start off with this first one here. So Maxime Bernier, this was a thread of, I think, 6 different tweets. He starts out saying, Trudeau keeps pushing his diversity is our strength slogan. Yes, Canada is a huge and diverse country. This diversity is part of us and should be celebrated. But where do we draw the line? Diversity is what makes Canada strong. Trudeau. That's Trudeau's video. So this is the problem. This is the problem. Where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? At the law. So if your culture breaks the law, that's where the line is drawn. What Bernier is doing here from the start is trying to create this us versus them mentality. That people who are already here, who in his mind are white people should be fearing other cultures coming into our society and changing our cultural norms. Well, where do we draw the line? Again, we draw the line at the law. Let me give you an example. Mother convicted of killing daughters in honor killing, ordered deported after life sentence served. That's where we draw the line. Honor killings, breaking the law. So this is just the first tweet. Let me get to the next one. So this is tweet number 2. Ethnic, religious, linguistic, sexual, and other minorities were unjustly repressed in the past. We've done a lot to redress those injustices and give everyone equal rights. Canada is today one of the countries where people have the most freedom to express their identity. And let me go to the third one. But why should we promote ever more diversity? If anything and everything is Canadian, does being Canadian mean something? Shouldn't we emphasize our cultural traditions, what we have built and have in common, and what makes us different from other cultures and societies? Maxime Bernier. So, what is he talking about here? Whose cultural traditions? White people. That's what he's talking about. He wants to emphasize the existing cultural traditions of white people. Because, why? So, I'm going to show you why this is anti-Canadian. So, if he was talking about indigenous people, he would actually have more of a point because we took their land. But establishing the existing traditions of Canada, which he obviously means white people. All he's saying there is, why are we allowing other cultures to then come into our country and take over what was once Canada in our minds as white people? It's obviously bigoted. It's obviously racist. Now, let me go to the next tweet before I break down this via Canadian law. So here's tweet number 4. Here we go. Having people live among us who reject basic Western values such as freedom, equality, tolerance, and openness doesn't make us strong. People who refuse to integrate into our society and want to live apart in their ghetto don't make our society strong. Now the dog whistles are getting stronger. The ghetto. Oh, I'm sure he's talking about the ghetto of Peterborough, Ontario. That is 94% white people. And let me show you here, if the screenshots are here. Highest unemployment rate in Canada. And also, Peterborough's food insecurity rate among highest on provincial and national levels, study finds. I'm sure he's talking about that ghetto. That ghetto of all white people. No. You know what he's talking about. So, this is just disgusting. And when he says here, quote, rejecting freedom, equality, tolerance, and openness, is he talking about the right wing, conservatives, like Rebel Media, who, here we go. Ex-Rebel Media host promotes 1930s book by fascist author advocating the elimination of Jews. Is that who Maxime Bernier is talking about? Or maybe he's talking about Ontario PC candidate Andrew Lawton. Gender and racial discrimination should be legal. Or maybe he's talking about Rebel Media host Holocaust video praised by Nazis and former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard. No, we know he's not talking about those things because those are his voters. Now, there's more tweets. we ain't done. Let's go to tweet number 5. Trudeau's extreme this is great. Trudeau's extreme multiculturalism and cult of diversity will divide us into little tribes that have less and less in common apart from their dependence on government in Ottawa. These tribes become political clienteles to be bought with taxpayer money and special privileges. Okay. Really? The multiculturalism quote here, extreme multiculturalism, cult of diversity. What are you saying? Notice how there's no mention of any specific policy in this anywhere. Maxime Bernier is not being critical of any Trudeau policy. If he was, he would be saying that. But he's not saying that. He's speaking in very vague generalities because he's dog whistling to a racist conservative base. That's what this is. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if he realizes what he's doing, but that's exactly what he's doing. Now, if you want to see why this is anti-Canadian, all you have to do is look at the multiculturalism policy in Canada, which is in our Constitution. Multiculturalism is literally in our Constitution. So let me show you that. So this is just A and B of a much longer list, but let me read this here. So it is hereby declared to be the policy of the Government of Canada to recognize and promote the understanding that multiculturalism reflects the cultural and racial diversity of Canadian society and acknowledges the freedom of all members of Canadian society to preserve, enhance, and share their cultural heritage. B. Recognize and promote the understanding that multiculturalism is a fundamental characteristic of the Canadian heritage and identity, and that it provides an invaluable resource in the shaping of Canada's future. So, those are just A and B. The list is a lot longer. But the point here is that multiculturalism is Canadian. If you're against multiculturalism, as Maxime Bernier is here, you are being anti-Canadian. Now, let me show you the his last tweet of all the tweets. This one here. Cultural balkanization brings distrust, social conflict, and potentially violence, as we are seeing everywhere. It's time we reverse this trend before the situation gets worse. More diversity will not be our strength. It will destroy what has made us such a great country. Just complete and utter bullshit. Multiculturalism is what made Canada what we are now. So for you to be anti-multicultural, as I said, is to be anti-Canadian. To try and preserve the way that you view Canada as a white person does not make you more Canadian than anyone else. We are all here and able to share our heritage, to share who we are, how we perceive to be Canadian, what we perceive as a Canadian culture. We can all share that. So to try and divide us based on our diversity is anti-Canadian and honestly disgusting. And he is just being a chicken shit here because he's not mentioning any policy. There's no policy at all. If he was against a specific policy, he would mention that. And that could be an actual focus of what he's talking about. But it's not. This is all just playing to the base. Okay. That was my longest segment of all the segments. Let me get the next question that I didn't get last time. So this is, again, off Super Chat. Baltaser again, it wasn't an ad. It was a suggestion in case YouTube continues to demonetize channels. Thoughts on municipal internet in Canada? I am totally for municipal internet. So making the internet itself a public utility, 100%. But we also don't have issues right now with net neutrality. So that is because you have issues right now in the U.S. with net neutrality. Municipal internet is a solution to that. But since ours is being protected at the moment and seems to be for the foreseeable future, I'm not too worried. But there's never an issue to in making the internet a public utility. All right, Moose Gal. Here's a good question. What is one Canadian law you want the U.S. to adopt? Man, healthcare, Medicare for all, because it is just it would literally save lives. So right now, according to a Harvard study, 45,000 people on average a year die in the U.S. due to a lack of access to healthcare. That number in Canada is 0 because if you need healthcare, you get it. So absolutely, I think the U.S. needs to adopt Medicare for all system. And I mean, that's not even to mention all the other benefits, like bankruptcies, medical bankruptcies that are, I believe, the most common bankruptcy in the U.S. Again, that doesn't exist in Canada because why would it? So Medicare for all would solve so many issues in the U.S. and would also lead to more preventative medicine that would lead to hopefully a healthier nation. So there you go. Ruben Garcia on Super Chat. Hey, David, how can progressive countries protect their lifestyles from neo-capitalist American influences? That's going to be an ongoing fight. It's one that there's no answer to. I mean, if we knew that, I think we would already be doing that. But I don't know. It's going to be an ongoing fight, and we have to win the messaging war. And I also think, I know a lot of you are going to agree with me because you don't live in Canada, but I think hate speech laws are good. And as long as they're specific in how they're applied. So I broke it down in a previous video, our hate speech laws. I think it's the video where there's Alex Jones, Glenn Beck, and me in the image. And so I broke down our hate speech laws there, and I think that what that does is it adds a ceiling to what is acceptable, what we are tolerant of in society. So if you pass that ceiling, then you're out. Or you're not out, but you deal with repercussions for doing that. So I think that's important to controlling the level of the conversation that we have in Canada. And I think that it would help the U.S. as well. But I can't even imagine the discussion around applying hate speech laws in the U.S. People would go freaking mad. Especially, or also progressives, which are going mad right now on this Alex Jones thing. So yeah, I'm not saying it's possible to apply it in the U.S., but I think it would be beneficial. Baltaser again, you are a big supporter. As a Canadian who advocates for single payer, Medicare for all in the U.S., do you get accused of being a Putin puppet? I don't think I've ever been called a Putin puppet. Maybe Poutine puppet. Oh my god. Did you make the same joke last time? Somebody made this joke last time. No, I don't get accused of calling a Poutine puppet. Very nice pun there. Or Putin puppet for that matter. Audio. All right. Let me get to the next story. Everything's going on right now. Phone notifications, computers jumping around, just a lot of stuff happening. Okay, so the next story. Oh, this one I have no content for, just me talking, because it is... Oh no, I do have content. I'm over prepared for this. I didn't even realize I had stuff for this. So, Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, has now completely changed how cannabis legalization is going to be dealt with in Ontario. So, what was going to happen... So, the way it's happening right now across the country. So, on October 17th, recreational cannabis will be legalized in Canada. But each province gets to deal with it their own way, as long as they follow some guidelines. So every province in Canada has to allow individuals or households to have 4 plants per household maximum. So you can have 4 cannabis plants in your house. That's all across Canada. And the recommended age by the federal government is 18 plus. In Ontario, it's going to be 19 plus. And there's also some other guideline. I mean, there's a lot to it. But basically, each province can decide how they want to implement it in terms of private versus public. So some provinces are doing a mix of both. Some are doing just private or just public, depending on how they're implementing it. But in Ontario, what was going to happen is we were going to have just a public control of cannabis sales and of cultivation and distribution. So we were going to have Ontario cannabis stores, which would sort of mirror what we have right now for liquor stores, the LCBO. So in Canada, the LCBO sells liquor, and we were also going to have Ontario cannabis stores just as the only store selling cannabis. That's now changing. What Doug Ford has now done is, actually, let me just show you here, is this. Premier Doug Ford is giving up Ontario's monopoly on weed, opening sales of recreational cannabis to private stores by April 1st in a dramatic shift that will make this province the biggest prize for Canada's emerging legal marijuana industry. The move scraps the defeated Liberal government's plan for 150 brick-and-mortar Ontario cannabis stores modeled on LCBO outlets by 2020. However, until a private retail system is in place, the OCS website will be the only legal source for recreational pot smokers in Ontario after cannabis use is legalized nationwide on October 17th. So, the Ontario Cannabis Store is still going to exist, but only exist online. So, October 17th in Ontario, the only place you'll be able to buy cannabis is over the internet. And there is mixed reaction to this. So, there are a lot of pot activists that are very happy about this because the private industry gets to come in now and sell cannabis. I'm actually not against that. I think that's fine. I think the private industry should be able to sell cannabis in brick and mortar stores. But I also don't understand why the Ontario cannabis store plan had to be completely scrapped. This is like, what's the problem with the public, with Ontario competing with private stores, private sales? Why is that an issue? Like, it almost feels like conservatives are afraid of actual competition. So with the Ontario cannabis stores, they would have been able to sort of regulate how much weed is. And now it's going to be really up to private stores to do that. But there's also, I mean, there's so many, in terms of standards. So the Ontario Cannabis Store was going to set a very high standard in terms of what to expect in these stores. Now that standard is just completely gone. So it's not clear how it's going to, or what sort of regulations are going to be around these private sales. So my issue here is that there's going to be no physical sales on October 17th. Nobody's going to be able to walk into a store and buy cannabis in Ontario on the date that it becomes legal. And that's going to mean decrease in the potential jobs of people that were going to be hired at these stores. That means a lack of revenue that pot sales were going to give to the province. So again, I think it's good to have private sales, but there was no need to eliminate the existing system. So, this is low on my list of issues of problems that I have with Doug Ford, but it's still a problem, and he still is. Him and his administration are still, or his cabinet, are still doing these things where they are just disregarding anyone else's opinion. There is no due diligence on any of this. The press's ability to ask questions now are now being silenced, and they're pushing out their own Ontario News Network as a way to push their own propaganda out there. So it hasn't even been 2 months, and there's been way more Doug Ford stories than I wanted. And this is just another one of those. So again, while I am open and I like the idea of private sales of cannabis, I see no reason to have scrapped the initial model. Okay, I think that's all my stories that I had prepped. Let me take the rest of the questions now and maybe join the chat in a second. What is happening? Okay. No, I took those. Okay. Let me go to Patreon. This is where it'd be good to have like a producer be like, hey, throw me the next question. And it's just me. I'm doing that. So, Okay, this question from Patreon came from River Mutsu. I love you, buddy, but you wrote a book here. This comment's a bit too long for me to read, but I will get to the heart of his question, which is, I think, in the third paragraph. Here it is. As to my question, and my apologies in advance if too common for taste, aside resources like pnhb.org, are there easily accessible sources on Canada's NHS to share with those who have never broke free from propaganda information which might be more digestible given their likely predisposition? Okay, I think that's a nice fancy way of saying, I want to read about Canada's healthcare. Well, here you go. So all you got to do is go to Google, search up Canadian healthcare, 2 words. Go to the link that is the canada.ca link. And I know it's an official link, but this is just breaking down the healthcare system. So it is should be, I think, the second link you see after you search Canadian healthcare. And go there. And it breaks down how our health system works, our healthcare system works. And it's very in-depth. Yeah, I'm not sure what more I can add to it than that. But like I've said a million times, just universal healthcare is the only way to go. Now, there are different ways to implement it, but let's just have this understanding that you need a public, a federal-based system for healthcare to properly cover everyone and ensure that you have a healthy population. I mean, this is just obvious. I'm so tired of this discussion because it's just been there. I haven't seen a new argument against it for, I don't know, years. I haven't seen any new arguments against universal healthcare. And you can't really form ones because we have examples of it working out in the real world. Okay. I think he had more questions. Let me try and see them. Okay, just for future reference, people, make your questions short and simple because I can't be reading novels. Since several years prior to Trump's administration, I've been planning gradually to relocate to Canada, Northern Europe, and Japan with a still progressing degree in philosophy and anthropology, not being a wealthy person at all to qualify on income. From your perspective, is Canada feasible to immigrate with a moderate income and associated degree? People have asked me this question before. I don't know. I was born here. So I can't be your go-to person to ask about how to immigrate to Canada. But look, if in terms of fitting into our country, you'll do fine. we took in a lot of Syrian refugees during the crisis a few years ago, and they're doing great. So we have a real support system here where we encourage refugees and or I don't know if encourage is the right word, but we try and facilitate an environment where refugees, immigrants are welcomed into this country. And when you first move here, there's going to be pockets of where you might see your more people that have your culture. So I'm not sure if this is really true now as it used to be, but I mean, Toronto, there are pockets of like Portuguese, Italians, Chinese. So there is this, the way Canada looks at multiculturalism or is multicultural is, yes, we allow you to bring your culture here and embrace your culture here. At the same time, everybody is open to everyone else's culture. So Portuguese go to Chinatown. Chinatown goes to, or Chinese people go to little Portugal. So it's all mixing. So it's a celebration of each person's culture while at the same time being able to experience all different cultures. Now, that I know that has, I think, nothing to do with your question, but look, you'll be fine. As long as Canada lets you in, depending on how the immigration laws work, you'll be fine. Here's the last question from this person. A last question, just in case it is given any thought. Do you see another Trudeau administration, or is he likely be unseated by someone more progressive or regressive? I think Trudeau in 2019, which is next year, I think is going to lose his majority, but I think he's going to retain government, a minority government. So in terms of him being replaced in the future, I mean, past 2019, it would just be anyone's guess. But ultimately, in the near future, I think Trudeau is going to maintain a minority government, but I think he's going to lose the majority. All right. Juggling everything at once. Jesus Christ. Okay. More patron questions. Brian Gonzalez. Completely unrelated to politics, but what's your favorite genre of music? And then Anthony Penza replied to that saying, I'm actually curious myself. Canada has some great bands like Toronto's July Talk, for example. So I listen to almost everything. I like all genres except for metal. Sorry, metalheads. I'm just not into it. It's too much for me. But I love hip hop. I like rap. I like indie. In terms of bands, I mean, I'm all over the place. So it's weird. I haven't been into new music recently, so the stuff I'm gonna say is gonna sound dated. But like when it comes to rappers, I like Kendrick Lamar. I like Drake. I like all the typical standard rappers. There's a lot of new ones coming up. I have no idea who the hell any of them are. But in terms of, hip hop as it was, let's say 3 years ago, that's what I'm into. And in terms of indie music, and I mean, Arcade Fire is a big Canadian band I'm into. M83 is not Canadian, but bands like that, sort of spacey indie music, I like a lot. Empire of the Sun, I like a lot. So yeah, I like everything basically except for I even like some country, especially 90s country. But yeah, in terms of metal, not really. Okay, next patron question. I think there's 3 more unless more come in. Anthony Penza, I want to see Trump get beat by a progressive in an election in 2020. To run on. Is this a fair observation? I think as a whole, it's a fair observation. But I mean, there are clearly Democrats or an independent that are pushing back against that. So this is the funny thing I keep noticing. So I watched Bill Maher this weekend for the first time in a long time. I've just been turned off his show completely. But I watched Bill Maher, and who was on? I forget who was on. But it was a Democratic politician that they were all saying was a rising star. And his response to this sort of question came up. His response was, yes, Democrats need to start talking about what they're about, what they're for. And he mentioned no policy. He's just like, yeah, we need to have a message. And what's your message? So this is what I'm noticing a lot. They're all saying, yes, we need a strong message for working people. We need a strong message for the American people. And then they don't mention anything. So that seems to be what the majority of Democrats are currently doing. But we are seeing people like, you have Ocasio-Cortez showing you that pushing specific policy in your platform when you're running can be a successful strategy. And I think the more we see that, or the more we see people winning that do that, the more other politicians are going to do that. Because, yes, even though a lot of them take money, ultimately they want to win. And that's why a lot of these 2020 hopefuls have stopped taking corporate PAC money, because they don't want to be accused of taking corporate money when they're running in 2020, even though that does ignore the dinners they have where it's like $2,000 a plate. So there is that part of the discussion that should also be a focus as well. So just because you're not taking corporate PAC money doesn't mean you're completely uncorrupted. But again, these are steps in the right direction. Everyone's moving in the right direction. But it's just a matter of focusing on candidates that we know are honest about it and are genuine. So someone like Ocasio-Cortez, who was, a bartender a year ago, we know she is serious about her platform. She has a history of activism. So she was at Standing Rock before she was even a candidate. So this sort of thing where it shows you who they were before they got into politics, I think that helps to inform us who we can actually trust in government. There's always more coming in at all times. Sorry, I'm trying to refresh these pages here to make sure I'm getting all the questions. Okay, from Jose Galdamez. Actually, sorry, 1 second. Just want to look at something. See, this is why I need a producer, because I can't do this when I'm live streaming. Okay. Jose Galdamez from Patreon. Can you talk about how Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, etc. are offering money to debate with AOC while at the same time ignoring debate requests with other progressives like David Pakman or Sam Cedar? Absolutely. I think you said it there. So this is why you have to always be aware of the right-wing framing and how we all fall into it. So, I even saw some progressives out there being like, AOC should debate Ben Shapiro. No, you have to understand. For them, they are doing this to raise their own profile. It's only to benefit them. The way Ben Shapiro looked at this is, one, if she accepts my $10,000 for her campaign, she's breaking campaign finance laws, so benefit for me. Or if she comes and debates me, that raises my profile because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez right now is a hot commodity. So Ben Shapiro did this for Ben Shapiro. So whether she accepted the debate or not, it benefits Ben Shapiro. Yet you have people like Cenk Uygur offering to debate Ted Cruz for the same thing, for $10,000. Who's covering that? Is anyone covering that? No one's covering that because nobody cares, and nobody should care when Ben Shapiro does it. So this is, and you hit it on the nail exactly. These people are avoiding debates with people that they would know they would lose to. People in their space, in the media space. People like David Pakman, like Sam Cedar. There's someone else that also challenged. I'm forgetting now. The guy that has the Zero Books podcast, I forget his name, but he challenged Jordan Peterson to a debate. Or to even come on a show. And he declined. So these people continue to decline left-wing voices in media, yet pretend that we are then trying to silence them. That the liberal media is taking over and we're taking down channels like Alex Jones because we're afraid of their fantastic message. That's not what's happening. There is a study out on, you could check Vox, more left-wing employees of universities, of these institutions are being fired. More left-wing voices are getting fired than right-wing voices. Yet, that isn't the conversation. The conversation is around the right being silenced. The conversation is around Ben Shapiro speeches being protested. Like that, and that's because the right wing has been able to grab this, and they have a whole infrastructure around it. Anytime one of them are silenced, they blast it out. Everyone gets all the right wing news outlets cover it. It becomes a huge story. But when a left wing voice gets silenced or gets fired, there is no infrastructure to blast that out, because we don't bitch and moan and cry the same way the right does. And I think in some ways we should start bitching and moaning and crying, because if we don't, we're just losing to their to the way that they are fighting this battle. So if we're always chasing the right wing, like I showed you earlier with Brian Stelter, how Brian Stelter was framing all his questions, and that's because the right wing cries, because you have Donald Trump out there complaining about CNN fake news, even though that is not the same thing as the left wing complaining about racial division on Fox News. So this is the problem. You can't let the right take over the conversation. You can't let the right decide the terms of the debate. Stacy DePonte on Patreon. How do we access this live stream? Oh shit. I probably should have linked to it before I went. This will be up later, so you'll see it. But yeah, I'll post that next time on Patreon. But if you were on Twitter, or you have my... Right now, if you're on YouTube watching this, hit the notification bell, which should be under the video somewhere. Hit that bell, or on the video. Somewhere there is a bell, and you're going to click it. Because when you click that bell, what happens is when I put a new video up, or when I go to live stream, you will be notified. And because I'm not putting a new video up every hour, it shouldn't be annoying. So you'll get a notification once or twice a day showing that either I'm doing a live stream or there's a new video going up. So hit that bell to know when I'm doing stuff. Last question on Patreon, unless I refresh this and there's more. From Andrea Witt, I think, or White. David, please clarify the numbers in the recent Mercatus Medicare for All study. Many are confusing the $32 trillion increase in federal spending with total national health expenditure, NHE. From table 2, total... Okay, I'm going to have to... I'll read this, but you're referencing a table here that I don't have in front of me. From table 2, totals, you can compare the $57.6 trillion under Medicare for All versus $59.7 trillion for current system, 2022 to 2031. Difference between those is the 2.1 trillion savings. Most reporters and politicians, except Bernie, are getting the basic math wrong. Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. I guess your only issue here is that it's not about the 32 trillion number and comparing that to, I think it was 34 trillion. But the issue is actually comparing, or the actual numbers are comparing the 57.6 trillion to the 59.7. So thank you for clarifying that. But yes, basically, I mean, the point that I try to make is that it saves $2 trillion over 10 years. So if you just know that, I don't think the details matter as much unless you really want to get into those. But I mean, when a Koch-funded study shows you that Medicare for All saves $2 trillion over 10 years, I mean, the debate's over. Medicare for All is the solution. Okay. I'm actually enjoying hanging out here. I'm actually enjoying hanging out here. No, I'm actually really enjoying hanging out here. And which is why I'm going to check the YouTube. Oh, screw this up. I'm going to check the YouTube chat, see what's going on. So there's like a 30-second delay here. So while I'm reading these chats, you have not heard me say this. So I'm just going to read some of this stuff and see what comes up. Here we go. Let's pick a comment at random. First of all, this is from Mama Alaska. First of all, those guys offering $10,000 is against the law. It's over what any candidate can take as a donation. Any candidate that would take that offer would automatically disqualify themselves. 100%. So, exactly. Odin, the bell is next to the subscribe button. Thank you very much. So if you are subscribed, or if you're not subscribed, hit subscribe, and then click the bell. Let me pick another one at random here. Here's one that just came up. David, how likely do you think that Biden will run in 2020? And if he does, would that mean that Bernie won't win because the Democratic vote will be split like it was in 2016? So there's a couple layers there. How likely will Biden run? Is it that Biden will run? I think it's likely. I think he might run. So there are sort of competing narratives in my mind about this. On one hand, Biden has been popular in the past, and in some of the polling coming out, he is even ahead of Bernie in terms of 2020 hopefuls. But when it comes down to it, and they're actually debating on the issues, I think Joe Biden will be exposed. Exposed as somebody who talks a good game, but has a history of being on the side of big business, on the side of banks. And that's going to hurt him. So as long as these discussions happen beforehand, hopefully if Biden runs, he'll get in early so we can start debating the stuff before any actual debates happen on television. And people can start understanding that Joe Biden, while he sounds like a nice dude, isn't necessarily in your best interest to vote for him. The second layer to that, I forget what it was. Maybe I responded to it, and it's now lost among all the other. No, here it is. And if he does, would that mean Bernie won't win because the Democratic vote? No. No. So as long as we have this debate, as long as the discussion is out there about the differences between these two candidates, that Joe Biden has a history of fighting for big business and Bernie Sanders has a history of fighting for the people, then ultimately I think that message will win. But I mean, it is possible that, like Hillary, Bernie and Hillary are going to sort of, go state by state and take different states. But I think there's going to be so many candidates in the primaries that ultimately Bernie's going to stand out, and a couple others like Biden, maybe Cory Booker, maybe Kamala Harris, maybe Kirsten Gillibrand. And I think a lot of them are going to split their vote. So it's very likely that the so-called establishment vote or the moderate vote will be split between Biden, Harris, Booker, Gillibrand. And Bernie Sanders and Warren, if she runs, will be competing for the progressive vote, which I think ultimately gives Bernie the advantage. Okay, I'm losing my voice. That doesn't happen very often. Okay, if you're wondering why I'm doing this on not on a green screen, but on a different camera, my AC is broken, and I cannot shoot videos, as I learned yesterday. So the video I shot yesterday, if you watch it, the one on Tom Perez, I am dying in that video. I have 3 hot lights on me in a closed room, and the AC is broken, and I'm sweating my ass off. So today I figured, you know what? There are so many stories I didn't get to cover yesterday that I want to be able to cover them all at once. So I thought live stream is the best way to go, and I can do a live stream with only one light on, so I'm not dying. So that's why I'm doing this. Let me grab some other random ones. Again, if you have super chats, I will get those immediately. Everyone else, it's just, you got to get lucky. Jesus. Okay, I'll probably get off in I don't know, 10 minutes. I haven't eaten lunch either, so, I got to eat lunch. Okay, more random stuff. First past the post voting system. This is from Amy Hart. First past the post voting system makes it easy for establishment Dems. 100%. All systems need to move to some sort of proportional representation with I think some sort of ranked choice voting in there as well. So yes, first past the post needs to die. Let me see what else I can grab randomly. From Travis Jones. So your reaction video to Alex Jones changed my mind away from a more hardline stance like Jimmy Dore has taken. However, now I flopped again after the Telesur banning. What's up with that? Hashtag big fan. Okay, you have to know the details around the Telesur banning. Telesur was banned in January, and now they were just banned again. So people have to understand this silencing of voices on social media sites was happening. I'm going to die here. Was happening before Alex Jones. So the slippery slope is a complete illusion. There is no slippery slope. There is banning Telesur here, banning BDS pages here, banning Alex Jones here, banning cannabis pro-cannabis YouTube channels here. It's all over the place. So there is no slippery slope, which is why defending Alex Jones' ability to be platformed means absolutely nothing. All it does is give fodder to the right wing to help show, to give them more evidence that they are being oppressed. That's all it is. You help the right wing by defending Alex Jones. This is a free-for-all. So you have to go on a case-by-case basis. That's the only way to do it. Now, look, as I've said a million times, if you think that YouTube, Facebook, or these social media sites should abide by the First Amendment, then you have to push to nationalize these websites or have some sort of public version of a Facebook or a YouTube. That's the only way to actually enforce that. Because people will complain to me, well, what if they change their terms of service? What if they don't follow their terms of service? Okay, what if they don't follow abiding by the First Amendment? What's forcing them to do so? They have to be actually forced into doing so. The only way to force them into doing so is to nationalize these platforms. So, and honestly, I don't even know if I'm for that. I think it's good that culture has sort of a say in what gets platformed. Now, at the same time, again, Alex Jones has his own website. He has an app. He can do his own thing. So the idea that there isn't an outlet for people that are quote unquote silenced is just wrong. There is an outlet for them. They can go anywhere else that allows them to. So yeah, I think I answered your question there. Just the slippery slope is an illusion. And simply based on that, based on the fact that left-wing pages have already been silenced before Alex Jones was, that shows you there is no reason to defend Alex Jones. And I know people are going to say, I'm not defending Alex Jones. If you are a free speech absolutist, much like a free market so if you're a free market capitalist, free market absolutist, by definition of being that, you are defending an oil company's ability to pollute without regulation. Even if you don't agree with it, even if you don't agree with them polluting, you are by definition allowing them to go by the free market and not go by any regulation. So the same thing applies to free speech absolutists. If you are a free speech absolutist, by definition, you are defending Alex Jones's ability to be platformed. So you are defending Alex Jones. That's just the case. Now, you may not agree with that. You may not agree with anything Alex Jones does. I'm not saying you do. I'm saying you are defending his ability to be platformed by being a free speech absolutist. And I think it's boneheaded. You have to look at this with a nuanced frame and understand how the right wing has dominated the Overton window, has dominated the conversation in politics. Everything is framed from the right wing perspective, and that's because they continue pushing the envelope of what is acceptable. And the more we tolerate it, the more that window moves more and more to the right. So that is the problem here. So people, like, if anybody on the left did what Alex Jones has done, I would also want them to be deplatformed. Like, do people not understand that? I don't care who Alex Jones voted for. I don't care what his political ideology is. What he did, lying and pretending it's news, his own lawyers admitted to that. And it affecting people, his conspiracies having a negative impact on innocent people. One Sandy Hook family had to move 7 times because they kept being harassed, because their address kept being published, because of the conspiracy theory that Alex Jones put out there. I'm on the side of being of fighting back against people who are immoral. So that's where my principle is. My principle is on, are you moral or immoral? If you're immoral, if you are having a negative impact on society, and it's clear that you are having that negative impact on society, then we need to think of ways of deplatforming you. That doesn't mean that you should be put in jail. That doesn't mean that you should be silenced completely for your speech. You can go and do your speech wherever the hell you want. It doesn't mean you need to be given the biggest platform that is available to you. So understand the differences here. This is a debate that's never going to end. because a lot of it is just people talking past each other. Is people not like, obviously I understand that corporations have too much power, that corporations are able to silence a page like Telesur or silence pro-cannabis pages on YouTube. I understand that. That doesn't mean that defending Alex Jones somehow benefits those pages. It's just ridiculous. Okay, I think this is good. I feel like I'm having a conversation with people, but no one's talking back to me. It's just like me talking to you, and you just can't talk. So it's getting kind of weird here. All right, let me get I like this comment from Aaron Willington. David will get banned soon. A Canadian foreigner trying to influence Americans about politics. Hey, you know what? It's not a bad perspective. I am indeed trying to influence you, but hopefully influence you with reality and not with lies and being immoral. But you know, we're all just the same, right? Alex Jones is the same as free healthcare. It's the exact same thing. Point me to anybody on the left that is Alex Jones. That is the Alex Jones equivalent. And I will tell you that they should also be deplatformed. But that person does not exist because Alex Jones just, I don't think he would be able to exist on the left because we care more about the facts. Okay. I just want to grab one random one that maybe was really early, and then I'll get out of here. One random comment. Oh, wait, there's another. Here we go. Super chat. John O'Shea. How did you get interested in American politics? Great question. Let me tell you. So I got into American politics by kind of growing up, at least through college, on Jon Stewart and Colbert. So that's when I really started to get into politics, was watching Comedy Central and learning about just how insane the media is, how insane politicians are, how insane the whole discussion is. And I think that's likely a large part of the reason I'm very focused on American politics, because I was influenced at a young age by that. But at the same time, I mean, I do cover issues in Canada, but I also don't think our issues affect the world the same way that American issues affect the world. Whether it's directly through something like war, or whether it's just standards that are set. So, I mean, when America does something, American culture does something, or Trump does something, it affects the world. The world knows about it. When, Doug Ford in Ontario does something, or even Trudeau does something, it's not really headline news. So, while I do care, of course, about issues in Canada as I live here, American issues I think are important to also try and inform people on, especially from an outsider perspective, someone like me looking in that can really understand just how ridiculous some of these discussions are. I think that gives me that gives you a perspective that maybe isn't as prevalent elsewhere. So that's what I try to offer, and yeah, ultimately it's also entertaining, which helps keep it all going. From Trevor Hudson, can't talk at work. Next patron, good work, Green. Indeed, I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds like you're at work. You can't talk. You are a patron, are going to be a patron, and you're telling me good work, and vote Green. Thank you for your contribution. Okay, one more question, because I want to get like a random chat person. A random chat person, because I speak the English language. It's from Louis Valdez. If it wasn't for the algorithm, you would have had 50 or 50. Something is off with my reading comprehension today. If it wasn't for the algorithm, you would have had 500,000 subs by now. But keep up the great work. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is something I noticed. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's an algorithm. Actually, it probably is. But when I first launched my channel, which was, well, I launched it in January of 2015. No, January of 2016. But I didn't really start pumping out videos on a consistent basis until July of last, no, May of last year. So May 2017. And in those first couple months, my subs jumped from maybe like 100 subs to 5,000 or like 10,000 in a few months. And then around the election, oh wait, the election already happened. Around the fall, it quickly tapered off. Even though I was still consistent with the videos, doing a video every day, the subs tapered off, and I have no idea why. I'm not sure if it's related to the adpocalypse, though I think that's a separate issue since advertisers kind of control who gets ads. But yeah, something happened with the algorithm where YouTube began to prioritize CNN. Actually, I think Mike Figueredo covered this, where they began to prioritize CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, traditional media outlets over independent media outlets. And that, I think, has clearly had an effect on subscribers and views. Though at the same time, while my subscriber base has sort of been slowly growing, views on videos are much better than they were a year ago. So, I'm not going to complain about that sort of thing. To me, this is all, like, I enjoy doing this. So whoever I'm fighting back against in terms of an algorithm or, I don't know, not getting the attention I deserve, according to some people, whatever, it's all part of the game. This isn't a level playing field. I'm just going to do my work. People are going to watch or not watch, and it's all going to be good. Okay. I keep wanting to end, but then I see a comment. It's like, oh, I want to read that one. Leon of London, why don't you IM into the Majority Report anymore? I never did. So who is IMing in my place? I called once, and I didn't really enjoy it, so I'm not gonna call again. But no, here's the real reason. I have my own show, so I mean, I guess I could talk to IM to a Majority Report or send questions in or call the show, but I got this, and you're watching it, so that works for me. Okay, damn it, I just saw one. Here it is. From Burnman23, I love your takedowns of candidates and voices following the money. Would you do one of Emily's List sponsored candidates? It's a corporate PAC. People get it twisted. You know what? I think it may have been you that also sent me that on Twitter. That's something I will look into. I know Emily's List, isn't a group you want to follow in terms of who to vote for. But yeah, I don't think I haven't seen anyone do an actual breakdown of Emily's List candidates and how they are corporate candidates. So that is a good idea for a video. I will look into that. My stomach is growling. I'm not sure if you hear it, but it just growled. So I'm going to make sure there's no more super chats. To make sure there's no more patron questions. And then I'm going to have to go eat lunch because I'm going to die if I don't. Okay. But I'm enjoying this. What if I just eat lunch here in front of you? That'd be weird. Now let me take one more. Join TYT, David. In what sense? So that's from SolexXX. SolexXX. I am a TYT member, but if you mean join like the panel, that's up to them. I'm also in Canada, so that makes it kind of hard. Majority Report does not play fair. That's from Gregory Wonderwheel. Honestly, they're great. Here's my new perspective on progressive media. I'm not going to agree with everyone always. I would hope I don't. It would also be impossible for me to do that, because there are all these different perspectives within these progressive channels. So, Sam Cedar thinks about things differently than Cenk Uygur, who thinks about things differently than Anna, who thinks about things differently than Michael Brooks or Jimmy Dore, and like go down the list. Mike Figueredo, Kyle Kalinske. Generally, we all want to get to a society that is beneficial for everyone. So the discussion really is just on the details. So to try and fight these channels on certain issues, I just don't see the point. I mean, we're all in this together, and we could actually learn something from the right wing in the way that they do this, the way they all work together, the way right-wing media all supports each other or all gets behind certain issues and all have unified messaging on that. So it would benefit us to do that. So to try and divide us is just stupid. I don't care. Look, I know there are a lot of people who are critical of certain shows, whether it's people who they think are too left or people that they think are too moderate. But ultimately, you have to understand that everyone I just mentioned is better than MSNBC. Everyone I just mentioned is more educated on these topics than MSNBC or CNN. So they are better than the corporate media alternative. It doesn't mean you're going to agree with all of them, but there are great things to learn from each of these shows. And that's why I watch each of them. And it's hard to because days are short. 24 hours, you can't really watch everything. But it's good to have a perspective on who else is doing this and how they feel about different issues, because it can help inform your perspective on different issues. Okay. I keep trying almost to get up. I'm not. Okay, I need to eat lunch. I need to eat lunch. And it is now getting hot in here. This one light that I have on is heating up the room. And look, I have no makeup person, so I'm always going to be shiny. I just can't help that. It's a problem. Okay. Let's take two more questions or two more comments or questions from YouTube chat. And then I'm out of here. Eric House or Huso, you should do something with Kyle since you live so close. Would make great conversation. U.S. versus Canada perspective. Yeah, I'm open to it. If Kyle wants to do something, I'm down. This is the thing. I am so bad. For over a year, I've been trying to set up the whole interview thing because I do want to do interviews, but because each of my days are so focused on, reading about what's happening and researching and then making these videos and editing the videos, I just haven't got around to actually figuring out how I would do interviews. But Patreon, luckily, is getting closer to that. So if you're not a patron, sign up. Once I hit 500 patrons, I'm doing a weekly podcast. And part of that weekly podcast will be an interview. So I keep having to yawn, and it's not coming out. So sign up, become a patron. And once I hit 500 patrons, interviews, I will be forced to then finally figure out the whole interview thing and start doing those. Have a weekly podcast that I'm not sure if I'm going to videotape the people I'm interviewing because that could lead to latency issues. But that's what I need to figure out. So support me and patreon.com/therationalnational, or even easier, go to therationalnational.com/join and become a patron now. All right. I think I said one more question. And any thoughts? Here's a good one that's timely from the Brothers Blue. Any thoughts on the election tonight? Any progressive candidates? So from what I understand, Randy Bryce, his primary is tonight, correct? That's in Wisconsin. I have two keyboards and I'm using the wrong one. So I would look at him. I think that is that's got to be Iron Stash. He's got to be the one to focus on today. But I think this is the great thing about these progressive groups. There are so many candidates now. Whether it's Our Revolution pushing out candidates, the DSA, or Justice Democrats, and oftentimes they all overlap. There are a lot of candidates being supported by progressive organizations that are not corrupted. And that's a great thing because it means a consistent influx of new progressive blood into the system. So what I would do, I'm not sure what state you're in, if there's elections happening in your state today, check justicedemocrats.com or whatever their website is, just research it. Justice Democrats, Our Revolution, and DSA. and look up who they are endorsing in various states and get an idea of maybe who you should vote for. And yeah, so look into those candidates, and you can trust candidates that DSA or Justice Democrats or our Revolution supports are candidates that are progressive. So there you go. That's my advice, my parting advice for all you. I'm just doing a double check because I don't want to miss people that paid for questions. Okay, patrons clean. Super chat's clean. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I will do more of these, and this will be available immediately after I'm done streaming. So if you missed it, you can go back and watch the rest of it. Thank you, and goodbye.